So know that even more warmer weather is coming. Honor. Honor means showing integrity, telling the truth, being honest, doing the right thing even when no one is looking, being responsible for your actions, respecting ourselves, others, our community, and the space around us, and always being ready to learn. So these are different ways that you can show honor. And there's other things that you can do to show honor as well. But making sure that you are keeping these things in your mind so you can be a honorable person. And we know that you'll grow and be trustworthy, and we know that you'll tell the truth and have integrity and doing the right thing when no one is looking, being responsible for things that you've done, respecting others, ourselves, and our community and everything around us, and always being ready to grow your brain, because a lot of you are going to the next grade level, and it's important that you guys all know that you need to learn more and more to help your brain grow. Just like you want your muscles to grow, you have to feed into your brain so your brain can grow as well. We're going to read this passage together. Honor. I show honor to myself by loving who I am and working hard each day. I show honor to my family by being the best person I can be, and when I make a mistake, I try to fix it. I show honor to my school by listening to my teachers and helping my teammates. So making sure that you're doing all these things in remote learning. School is coming back soon, and we're trying to make sure that you guys are still learning all of our hope values while also growing your brain every day. In this lesson, these are our learning objectives. In this lesson, Kipsters will be able to understand the scientific method. Last week, I talked about the scientific method a little bit. Even though we did the scientific method, I didn't verbatim or I didn't specifically tell you guys what the scientific method was, but we've been using the scientific method all throughout this time. In this lesson, Kipsters will also be able to make a boat. So hopefully you guys learn some different tactics to create a boat. And Kipsters will also be able to investigate how things sink or float. Big question. Why do you think items sink or float? Next, can we create a boat that will float, and how? So our big question help encompass the lesson. So at the end of our lesson, you should be able to answer these two questions. Why do you think items sink or float? And can we create a boat that will float? And how do we create that boat? Scientific method. Scientific method can have a lot of different things. And when you guys are back in school, for some friends, you guys learned about the scientific method. This is a smaller scientific method to help us get through some different science experiments, which you guys will also be doing when you come back to school. And hopefully you're doing them at home as well. First thing is observe. Right here in the eye, first thing you want to do is observe. Next, you start with a question. Then you have a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated, a hypothesis is an educated guess. So whenever someone says hypothesis, they just mean guess. Experiment, which is my favorite part, is to actually get into that, doing that experiment. And conclusion. And a conclusion has the answers to your question. So your conclusion has the answers to your question. So we're going to observe. We're going to ask a question. We're going to create our hypothesis. We're going to have an experiment. And finally, we're going to come with a conclusion. First thing we're going to do is observe. So right here we have 4 different materials that we're going to observe. These are the materials that we're going to think about using to see if they can sink or float. So we have some Play-Doh, we have some tin foil, we have some paper, and we have a brick. Again, we have some Play-Doh, tin foil, paper, and a brick. I want you guys to observe these items. All we're doing is observing. So I just want you to look at them. Okay, cool. All right. Question. Which material do you believe will sink? Which material do you think will hold the most popsicle sticks if it floats? So first I want you to think, going back, which one of these materials do you think will sink? So thinking which one of these items will sink. It could be all of them. Maybe they all will sink. Or which ones will float. We're also going to be using popsicle sticks and try to see which one of these materials can hold the most popsicle sticks. So I also want you to think, which one of these things do you think will float while also holding the most popsicle sticks? So you have Play-Doh, tin foil, the paper, or the brick. Which one do you think will hold the most popsicle sticks? As you're doing that, you also can get a notebook out. So this is my science journal. You see it says Kip here, our lovely school. And you can write down your different notes. So one note that I could possibly write, I think that the brick will sink. I think the Play-Doh will sink. I think the paper will sink. I think the tinfoil will sink. These are all things that I believe. You can have different things. Maybe you think the paper is going to float. Maybe you think the brick's going to float. Whichever one you choose, you're going to write it down in your notes. Next, you're going to say which one of these things do you think will hold the most popsicle sticks. So I'll say, I think the paper will hold the most popsicle sticks. All right. Then you write that inside of your observation notebook. So let's move on. Or your scientific notebook. Hypothesis. Now we're going to make a hypothesis. So now you had the word think inside of your notes, but we want to use the word hypothesis to get a little bit more specific. Remember, a hypothesis is just an educated guess. So which material do you believe will hold the most popsicle sticks? You're going to write in your notebook, my hypothesis is, and whatever you choose will hold the most popsicle sticks. So Mr. Jennings chose the paper. I think the paper will float with the most popsicle sticks. And then you'll write that in your notebook. Now for the fun part, the experiment. So let's see which one of these materials will hold the most popsicle sticks and which materials will sink and which materials will float. So we are in our experiment phase. In our experiment phase, we're going to test the things that we observed earlier. So here, I have some aluminum foil. I have a brick. I have some Play-Doh. And I have some paper. And we're going to be testing our questioning to see which one of these materials will be able to hold the most paper and which one of these things can float. So first things first is we are going to create a boat using aluminum foil. Now, what you're going to do is pull it out like a square of aluminum foil, like that. Then what you're going to do is take it. You're going to fold it in half. All right, fold it. Then you're going to fold one side down like a triangle. I'm going to fold it down like a triangle. Fold the other side down the exact same way like a triangle. You're going to open it up and it'll be like our boat. So it's like a boat. We're gonna do the same thing with the paper. So one, have my boat here. We have a brick. We're not gonna make the brick into the boat, but we're gonna test to see if it'll be able to float. We have our paper. We're gonna do the same thing with the paper. I'm gonna fold it. I'm going to fold two sides. All right, fold two sides. And I'm going to make it to a boat the exact same way. All right, so it kind of open, you can open it up and it's gonna be like our next boat. We have our popsicle sticks. We have our observation notebook. Let me quickly grab my pen. We're gonna be testing to see what floats and what doesn't float. So let's test the brick first. So put the brick into the water and we're gonna see if this brick is able to float. Now things float based on density. Everybody say the word density. Everybody say the word density. All right, density has to do with the particles that are inside of an object. Even though you can't see those particles, particles are in everything. Water also has density. So whichever one has the most the more density is the one that will, so if it has more density, it'll sink, and if it has less density, it'll float. So if the brick sinks, that means that the brick is more dense than the water. Let's see. All right, good. So obviously the brick sank. So we're gonna write that down in our observation notebooks here. Brick sank. It did not float. The brick sank. So we won't be able to put any popsicle sticks on the brick, obviously. Next, we're going to check the Play-Doh. Now, I want you to think, do you think the Play-Doh will sink or will the Play-Doh float? I'll take a piece of it. So, not only is density a major part, but also the shape. So, we're going to try to shape it a little bit like a boat. So, we're going to have some air kind of in the middle of it. And we're going to be able to see, I'll use it all, actually. We'll use it all. We'll use it all. What you want to do is, if you have Play-Doh at home, you're going to make it flat. You're going to try to make it air kind of inside. It's going to make like a hole. So it's going to kind of sit up a little bit. And we're going to see if this Play-Doh boat is able to float. I'm going to make it kind of like a sphere, kind of. But we don't want to close it up. Just going to make it a little bit in there. Let's see. Oh, it's floating. And it has some water in it. So it floats until the water gets on top of the Play-Doh, and then obviously, once too much water gets into it, then it starts to sink. So it does float for a second. As long as there's no water in it, it will float. So I'm gonna keep this here. I'm gonna wipe my hands off with some paper here. All right. So this is gooey. All right. All right, so we have two things we still want to test. We still want to test our paper, and we want to test our aluminum foil. So remember, I'm gonna make this kind of like a boat. Let's see if I can make a better boat. Maybe instead of that, we'll make it into a kind of like a square, so it doesn't get water inside of it. Because once the water gets inside of it, then it becomes too dense, and then it'll start to sink. So we'll make this one into like a square. Here, probably can do the same thing with the aluminum foil. And then you want the square to like stand up somehow. Let's use a different sheet of paper. All right. So I'm gonna make it stand up. So I'm gonna try my best to make it stand up here on all sides by folding each one of those corners. This is harder than it looks. Let's just see without it, okay? All right, so we'll just have that kind of there. Obviously, when it gets too much water on it, it's going to start to sink as well. So we want to do our experiment before it gets too much water and it becomes too dense where it sinks. Because if it's all wet and it's water, obviously the density of the water will be the same as the water, which will make it sink. Finally, we have our aluminum foil. We're going to put that in there. All right, let's see which of these things will hold the most popsicle sticks. So far, I've seen that the Play-Doh, which we're not gonna be able to test because I just can't make a boat out of it, but see which one of these things hold the most popsicle sticks. But so far, the Play-Doh was able to float a little bit, the paper is able to float, the tinfoil is able to float, and then the brick was not able to float. It sank, which means it was more dense than the water. So let's test this paper first. Actually, I'm gonna get a new sheet of paper. Get a new sheet of paper, put it on top like that, okay? So let's test the paper first to see how many popsicle sticks the paper can hold. 1, so these are past. 2, count with me. 3, 4, before it sinks. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a lot, right? 11. It's going too far. Let me bring it back. Right here. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, I want to stop there and see if I can beat 15 with the tinfoil. All right. So we're gonna move this paper out the way. All right, let's try the tinfoil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all their passengers. So far the paper has 15 passengers. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, so they're both at 15 so far. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 people. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, we will stop there. So we were able to see that paper is able to float, and also that the tinfoil was able to float. They both were able to collect 20 passengers or popsicle sticks on their ride. So we know that if we wanted to ride something that could float, if we were very small, it wouldn't be the brick. We'll probably use the tin foil or the paper. Might not even use the Play-Doh because the Play-Doh isn't the shape of the Play-Doh isn't helping it stay up for long. So that's our experiment for this week. Hope you were able to see what was dense and what was not dense, and meaning what was able to float and what was not able to float. So we see that the brick was pretty dense. We see that the brick was more dense than the water. The paper was not more dense than the water. The tinfoil was not more dense than the water. And the Play-Doh was kind of in the middle, where it is a little more dense than the water if water is on it. But if it doesn't have any water on it, then it is also less dense than the water and it is able to float. So that's our lesson this week. Hope you guys had fun to see what sinks and floats. Maybe you can try these things at home to tell me what is more dense than the water in your house or what is less dense than the water in your house. So hope you guys had fun with that experiment. Now we're going to do a quick graph and see what things sunk and which things floated. So did it sink or did it float? Sink or float? So the brick sank. So we're going to put a check right there for sink. It did not float. We'll put an X for float. The Play-Doh, did it sink or did it float? The Play-Doh sank and it also floated. So I'm going to put a check on both of those items. You can write these things down inside of your investigation notebook. The paper, did the paper sink or did it float? It floated. It did not sink. It floated. And what about the aluminum foil? Did the aluminum foil sink or did it float? It floated as well. It did not sink. And we also seen that the paper and the tin foil were able to hold 20 popsicle sticks. So they also were able to have passengers on it. The Play-Doh, we don't know because it sank too quick, but right after it floated. So this is our graph of the different things that we looked at for sink or conclusion. So conclusion is the last piece. In the conclusion, you either state that your hypothesis was correct or that your hypothesis was incorrect. Either way, it isn't a problem because we now have our answer from the experiment. So earlier when we wrote in our investigation notebooks, our hypothesis, either it was right or it was wrong. And if it was right, great, good job. You decided that the paper or the tinfoil was going to hold the most popsicle sticks, and you knew that it was that it would float, which is great. But if you said that the brick was floated and then it didn't float, you just change your answer and say that the tinfoil and the paper floated and they were able to hold the most popsicle sticks. So the good thing with science is you're always able to change your answer at the end after an experiment, and that's the most fun part. Learning objectives. In this lesson, kids were able to learn about the scientific method. Kids were also able to make a boat. So you guys can make your boats at home with paper or tinfoil, maybe even Play-Doh. Maybe you do a better job than Mr. Jennings did with the Play-Doh. Obviously, you don't want to use brick because the brick will sink. And kids were also able to investigate how things sink or float, which we were able to see through density. Remember, if things are more dense than the water, they will sink. And if things are less dense than the water, they will float. So finally, send in your notes. So if you want to send in the notes on your scientific observation notebook, or you can send in a picture or a video of your own ship or boat that you created. Remember, you can send all of these things to cjennings@kipchicago.org. Catch you guys later. Hope you guys had just as much fun as I did.